All right, guys, so we're going to go through the hip hinge. Now, in the strength training world, this movement pattern is called a Romanian deadlift, or RDL. So hip hinge, RDL, interchangeable. Now, the first fundamental in a hinge is that we hinge from the hips. So what that means is that your trunk is a stable unit, and the movement primarily comes out of your hip joint. Now, when you do a hip hinge, you will bend the knees a little bit, but it's a stiff knee. So we don't progressively bend the knee down as in a squat or a traditional deadlift. You're going to keep a relatively stiff knee, and generally, we want to have about a 30-degree knee bend at the bottom, okay? The other thing that I want to point out is where you land in terms of your feet. So I want you to make sure that your weight center of mass or your center of gravity stays right over top of the middle of your foot. So a lot of people, when they do a hinge or a deadlift, they end up back in their heels. And I want you to make sure that your toes are staying grounded. So none of this kind of stuff where your toes are lifting up, but get your center of mass over top of the middle of your foot so you feel like you're grounded right from all 5 toes in through the heel, equal weight bearing. Okay, so now the hinge and the detail about how we stabilize for it. So what I want you to do is I want you to create a little bit of expansion around all corners of your abdominal wall. So if you place your hands around your trunk and then just breathe into your thumbs, breathe into your fingertips, I want you to feel like you're creating an expansion and a stiffness into your fingers. That's how we're going to create our brace. And then from there, you're going to dominate the hinge from your hips. And the really good cue for that is just do a karate chop into your hip joint and then reach away from your hands. Now, everyone thinks that the hip is up here. This is your pelvis. So this is your pelvis. This is your hip joint deep in here. So if you stick your fingers into that crease in there, as you sit back into your hips, you're going to feel the hip reach away from your fingers, and then basically just think continue to reach away as you drop into your hinge. Now, I just said don't rock into your heels, and then I'm saying reach away from your fingers, which means your hips are going backwards. That seems contradictory, but it's not, because that also means that your upper body is going to hinge forward over top of your feet. So you're not just going backwards, you're hinging from the hip, landing center of mass over top of the middle of your foot, and then back up. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can cue this. Some people really struggle with controlling their lower back in a hinge, so they'll end up in this position. Other people will be the opposite of that, where they'll go into like an open scissors position, so they'll stick their butt out, chest will rise up, and they'll end up in this open scissors position. We don't want either of that. We want you to stay right in the middle. For that reason, that's why I like first create some tension, create that a little bit of expansion, embrace, and then just karate chop into the hips. But there are other options, so let's talk about that. So if you have a golf club, a hockey stick, a ski pole, or just a wooden dowel, place that dowel along your spine and place your fingertips in this space where your low back is. Now, 3 points of contact, hold those 3 points, and then again, drop into your hinge. Now, there's one reason why I don't often teach it with the dowel. It's because what people often do is they end up into an open scissors position like this. So they'll end up here. And what I really want is for that rib cage to be settled down a little bit, settled down so you sit right over top of your pelvis, and then drop your hinge from that position. And so the dowel can make it a little bit harder in that regard. You can go a little bit into that open scissors pattern. But for those people who really struggle with that control of the lower back, holding that 3 points of contact through your hinge can be a good point to build that awareness. Another option to train the hinge is to reach your hips back into a wall. Okay, I'll use this because it's here. Essentially just stand in front of that wall, and then you reach your hips back and you try to touch your bum to the wall behind you, and then drive up and out of it. And then take your feet forward a little bit and then do it again. Reach the hips back, tap the wall, and then drive back up. This movement pattern is going to be really good for you to get full length through your hamstrings. Again, the only counter I would have for this way to coach it up or this way to practice it is that it can teach you to get too far into your heels. So just be aware of that. It's a good way to teach you how to get back into your hips, which is a good thing. Reach those hips back, tap on that wall, see my toes are still on the ground, and then I anchor my feet, and then I pull through to finish up into my tall standing position. So 3 options: karate chop through the hips, hinge into it. Second option, use the dowel, 3 points of contact, hinge, take your hips back to a wall. This will teach you to get back into your hips. Challenge yourself to take those feet out so you can just barely reach the wall with the hands reaching forward, and then drive up out. Just remember those toes have to stay on the ground. And then once you're done that version of it, I would encourage you to come off of it, get back into your hips, but get your center of mass over your whole foot so you feel like you're anchoring into the floor, and then again, drive out of it. So that's the hip hinge. Hopefully that helps you, and good luck with your practice.